Hi everyone, my name is Nicole and I am from the Department of Global Strategic Communication, Swiss German University, Indonesia, and I'm going to present about my research paper on the public sentiments on Freeport's sustainability and its impact on the Pestapora Festival, a social media analysis. The background of this case is that Pestapora, being one of the biggest music festival in Indonesia promoted by Boss Creator, faced a controversy as they secured a sponsorship from PT Freeport Indonesia, or also known as PFTI. There's a reason of why PT Freeport Indonesia is considered controversial in Indonesia, as PT Freeport Indonesia has a long-standing history of environmental damage, law violation, and also them having human rights issues. This raised many concerns from many sides, from the audience, from the artist that's going to perform in the festival, and therefore it leads to some key artists such as Hindia and also Sukatani withdrawing from the event. And because of these withdrawals, it ended up on the cancellations of the sponsorship by September 6, 2025. And therefore, the research question for this research is how does the public sentiment regarding Freeport's issue affect Pestapora's reputation as a whole? To answer this research question, we use the method of qualitative research with the step of being first crawling through Instagram comments from 3 different posts, which was Pestapora, Hindia and Fis, and lastly Sukatani, by using a tool called Instagram Commenter Exporter. And there, we filtered each comment using Stewart's Hall theory of encoding and decoding. And then lastly, we analyze and also explain each of the sections before reaching into our results and discussion. The base of this research uses Stewart's Hall theory of encoding and decoding, which rejects the notion that media messages are passively received by the audience. In the context of this controversy of Pestapora having Freeport as their sponsor, the message that was sent, which was the encode, is the sponsorship or the idealism, and it was always meets the audience framework of understanding, which would be the decode of this case. The coding position was divided into 3. First of all, being dominance, which means that the audience was fully accepting the message that was intended by the sender, and they agree without any criticism gave back to them. Second of all, there's negotiated, which means there is a critical compromise. It was when the audience would accept some of the message, but also would reject it at the same time, which creates a situational exceptions. And then third of all, being oppositional reading, which means the audience radically reject the message, and then they also replace it with a rival ideological framework. Based on our research, we came up with the result of netizens having various reaction towards the case and also the 3 different posts. But at the end, negotiated type of reaction has the highest number of every of the 3 posts. Pestapora having 66.67%, and then Hindia and Fis having 62.7%, and then lastly Sukatani having 57.05%. This shows that all of the 3 posts has at least more than half of them being negotiated. It follows to the second one being dominant, where Pestapora has 13.33%, and then Hindia Fis having 23.3%, and then lastly Sukatani has 55.57%. Lastly is the oppositional reading, where Pestapora has 20%, Hindia with 40%, and Sukatani 7.38%. For the negotiated reading on Pestapora, the highlight of this would be the ethic and also the dilemma between the audience, where some of them would criticize the sponsors but also keeping their focus on the fun side of the festival. Some of them would compare between Freeport and also other sponsorships such as cigarettes and also alcohol, which is as bad as mining company. And then for Hindi and Fis, the highlight of it would be the moral dilemma and the fans, which most of them would appreciate the artist's idealism, but at the same time they would also complain about the impact on the audience who have already sacrificed a lot, their money, their time, which lead them to the disappointment to the artist. One of the representative quotes being, gue sangat amat respect, tapi coba lihat dari sudut pandang penonton, Bus. This implies that the audience is disappointed at Bus's choice on withdrawing from the festival. And then for Sukatani, the highlight would be the issues versus the bureaucratic reality, which most of them would acknowledging the issue of justice, but also seeking compromise with social and also political realities. One of the representative quotes being, banyak yang belum paham about this case. And there are also another problem regarding Timnas, and it has different contexts. So the conclusion of the negotiated reading is that some of them may have led to another problem, but at the same time they also have a different reaction, and they might accept the message intended by the sender, but at the same time they also lead it to another problem. For the oppositional reading, the highlight of Pestapora would be the total sponsor rejection, where the audience reject fully of Freeport's legitimacy in the cultural events. One of the representative quotes being, kan lucu, maksudnya kan bilang dong sponsor kan untuk senang di atas penderitaan orang Papua. This implies the ignorance of Pestapora before researching regarding of their sponsorship. And then for Hindi and Fees, the highlight is the hypocrisy of criticism, where people would attack their consistency or their idealism. One of the representative quotes being, keluar dari Spotify dong, jangan nanggung. Kalau mau idealis, yang jelas Spotify ingin merusak dunia. This implies that if the artists choose their idealism more than their career, then they have to be consistent with their idealism and remove themselves from anything that's related to the ruin of the nature and also to the society. And then for Sukatani, the highlight of it would be demanding evidence and also accountability from the case, where people would reject the activism without clear evidence of the result, with the representative quotes being, lihat bukti duit dari musisi nyampe ke Papua dong. This implies that the audience wants the transparency from the artists, whether they were working on their activism or they're just bluffing regarding their activism. Lastly, for the dominant reading, is that in Pestapora, it highlights the acceptance of corporate hegemony, where the sponsorship is fair and also supportive of the event. Some people agree that Freeport needs to be removed from the sponsorship line, and therefore some of the representative quotes praising the action that's been taken by Pestapora. And then for Hindi and Fees, the highlight of the comments would be acceptance of the moral integrity, which supports the idealistic or attitude from Hindia or Bas, where many would say sungkem, respect, keren. That implies that the audience are satisfied of the action taken by Hindia or Bas. And then lastly, for Sukatani, the highlight of it would be strong narrative acceptance, where supporting calls for justice and supporting counter-dominant negative. For example, it would be the mismanaged local government that happened in Papua or Gresik. Some of the representative quotes empathizes with the victim in Papua. For example, mereka di Papua dapat dana dari pusat, tapi pemerintah daerah sana nggak bisa kelola dengan baik. This implies the disappointment from the audience and they're empathizing with the victim for what happens from Pestapora and also the government, and therefore they're demanding actions and movements to clear the case. So the conclusion of this research is that netizens have a lot of various of reaction towards the case, as Pestapora being one of the biggest music festival in Indonesia and Freeport being one of the biggest mining company with lots of dark history and also controversies that already been called out by many. And the highest numbers of comments being the negotiating reading. This implies that the audience partially accepts of the message of that was intended by the author, but at the same time they would also reject it because they feel like it's not suitable nor they agree with the author. That is all for my presentation, and I am very much open to future collaboration regarding this topic. Thank you.